we're 1 year out from the World Cup right now. 365 days. We're recording this on Thursday. Canada kicks off June 12th at BMO Field. It was Soccer Day in Toronto. They unveiled the clock. I know you were at the Vancouver event as well. How are we feeling 1 year out from the World Cup? For me, it's kind of, it settled in walking up to BMO Field, because I'm like, you don't really feel it right now walking through Fort York and getting to BMO Field, and you just check in at the door. Like, it just felt like any old TFC game or any old Canada soccer game. But like, there's going to be a security perimeter. There's going to be a whole bunch of chaos, fans everywhere, especially for that first game. It's going to be a sea of red and white, and whoever they face, it's just going to be outstanding to be there in that moment. And I'm certainly going to have to a lot more time to get to the press box at that game than I would have otherwise.
Yeah, it's tough because I think on one hand, I'm with you. Like, I'm bubbling with excitement just going to those events, seeing the clock, seeing it in physical form, the 1 year, see it slowly tick down, and think like, yeah, you're right. In a year, I'd be standing there. And there's just, the energy, the buzz. I think especially from a Canadian perspective, it's really exciting. Like, the team's doing well. The team's in a good spot. Like, there's a genuine, you're looking at next year and you're thinking, okay, they can get this first win. They can get out the knockouts. They can make the country dream a bit. So wearing my Canadian hat, I think I'm ecstatic. I would say I think it's just super cool that this week it's all culminating. On the other hand, it does feel like the overall tournament interest, like what's going on in the US, for example, right now is really dampened the mood. I feel like on football, with just all the situations going on with ICE and border control at games and visa issues. And now the Club World Cup just feels like it's going to be an absolute disaster. All of a sudden, stuff that seemed so exciting years ago in the schedule and hosts were dropped, like, oh man, going to Seattle to go watch games between games in Vancouver, going to a final in New Jersey. All of a sudden, that stuff just kind of seems bleh. Of course, a lot can change in a year, but I do think that's why this week's been so weird, because from a Canadian perspective, it's just been such excitement, such buildup. But then if you look at the tournament at large, what's going on down south does make for a weird, like, wow, this just does not feel right that country is going to be hosting the World.
Yeah, it definitely irks me to see what's going on in the US, but I also think if you move politics aside for a second, and you can't really do that completely with the World Cup and with what's going on in the US right now, especially with countries like Iran already qualified and Haiti moving on to the next round of World Cup qualifying as well, the ramp up for the promotion for this tournament does not happen until 8 or 9 months out. We're not at that point where you start to get excited. And I think it is also going to be a shorter timeline for the US as well, where, a lot of people don't know that the final is going to be in New York. There's so many things that happen in the US. They've got their attention on other sports where the world just wouldn't necessarily pay attention when they're hosting a World Cup. Like, the Super Bowl is still matching the World Cup in terms of excitement, right? Gianni Infantino says it's going to be 104 Super Bowls or whatever. But they got to get past the Super Bowl first. They got to get past the World Series first. And then, it will be exciting to see the U.S. hosting the World Cup, and the Americans will get excited about it. It would also help if their team was performing a little bit better. Maybe a Gold Cup run can help that. I know it doesn't really track in the United States as much, and they don't have their top players. But I do think that, in that 6-month window, we're going to see some real excitement from south of the border in the World Cup. But then you also have the concerns about it, where you have experienced dictatorships, if you want to call it that, like Russia and Qatar. They made sure that everything went off without a hitch. People said they had, a great time in Qatar, a great time in Russia, and maybe that with hindsight, that was not the right thing to say. But they managed to do these tournaments well. I don't think anybody can say that the Russia World Cup and the Qatar World Cup for the month of the World Cup were well put on, and they colored themselves well as countries, as much as that doesn't necessarily jive with their current political situations at the time, or what fans would have thought going to that country outside of the World Cup month. I'm not sure the US does the same thing, because we hear about ICE coming to provide security at the Club World Cup. Who knows how the Club World Cup plays out. We've seen immigration officials board a Telemundo boat as well, as they were doing a 1 year out show in the Miami Harbor. That this is a U.S. government that doesn't know how to host an event like this, and doesn't quite know that you're supposed to make things look good, at least for the month of the tournament, which experienced dictatorships did in Qatar and Russia. And I'm not saying the U.S. should become Qatar and Russia, but I'm saying that this trying to be dictatorship that the US has going on right now isn't exactly coming off in the same way that the experience once did. And that makes it very concerning in a public, very front page realm, whereas you had to go a little bit deeper to find your concerning moments. And there were a lot of concerning moments with Russia and Qatar, not to go on a complete tangent there, but that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, and I mean, you're right on all fronts, but what I would say is too, even if you are going to detach yourself from the political landscape, which is tough because you got like even just again fans applying for visas from countries who are allowed to. It's like a 12-month wait, and teams don't even know if their countries book spots yet. So much politically involved in this tournament, but even without it, it's hard to be excited because ticket prices are going to be so exorbitant. Like that for me is also one that, again, I mentioned earlier, it kind of pissed me off because it's like, this is going to be such a great chance to see top class football, to really gauge interest. And it's going to be more of the cash grab variety. I think the Club World Cup kind of set the tone for that, unfortunately. Like the Club World Cup has the potential to be a fun tournament, right? And like there's the biggest teams in the world coming to North America and some fun games you're not going to see otherwise. And it's just hard to get excited for when you're like, oh, let's go see a ticket for two teams I don't really care about. It's $120 and you're sitting in the top row and stuff like that. And the fact that they had to realize and completely change the structure of their tickets and everything shows that like this can't, like, again, it's just frustrating. What should be a moment to grow the sport feels like it's going to be a moment to gouge. And that just, that also doesn't sit right for me. And I've seen a lot of sentiment on that of people being like, why the heck should I be excited about the idea that if I want to go to games with my family, I might be dropping $5,000? And when it comes down to tickets, hotels, you know how things are in North America, people love to gouge. All of a sudden the hotels, all the B&Bs, everything is at a way elevated price, etc. Like there are a lot of things beyond the politics too that aren't very exciting about this World Cup. And I guess, not to get all doom and gloom about the tournament, I guess that's why it shows the next 12 months are going to be so fascinating to follow, because I think there's going to be a lot of eyes open that, yeah, this is a special tournament. Yeah, this is a tournament that brings people together, but you have to put the conditions in place to make that happen. And there's a lot of worry on that front for all the good stories that there are.
Yeah, I'm not enticed by the dynamic ticket pricing that they're planning on doing, because that is just going to bring the cost through the roof, because the demand is going to be there for World Cup tickets across the board. It's going to be very difficult to get tickets. I do think that Canada is doing what they can in some ways to make sure that there are Canadian fans in the stands for those games. There will be, but I think you also run into the potential of sort of a Maple Leafs atmosphere. I think, you know, I've mentioned the Maple Leafs several times here. Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment just hosted the Canadian Shield. And by the way, I think they paid for the appearance fees for the visiting teams as well, which was a benefit to Canada Soccer, no doubt. But you don't want to just have people that aren't necessarily passionate about the game in the stands. You still want a Voyageurs section. And I think there's going to be a lot of people that are prepared to kind of bite that bullet and spend a lot of money on these tickets. But that's unfortunate that they're going to have to spend a lot of money to get into the stands for these Canadian games in particular. The good thing, I think, is there is this Canada Red program and these other programs to give Canadian fans priority on these tickets. It is, you know, favoring a higher price. You have to buy in, you have to be a member and all that, but it does offer that opportunity for Canadian fans to get their hands on tickets in a way that I don't think you're necessarily seeing in the US.
Yeah, but it is unfortunate when you hear stories of locals being offered cheaper tickets at past World Cups. You'd hope that's the case. I guess, again, things can change, but no, definitely a tough feeling. But I mean, hey, the one good thing is the beauty of a World Cup. It doesn't always have to be in the stadium. It can be the parties outside the stadium. And man, just like imagine the vibes if Canada made a run to the quarterfinals, which, by the way, shout out at Cascadia Dream coming in hot in our comments saying they have a prediction quarterfinal run in 2026. That's the energy I want to see. Canada's flying right now. Let's make it happen.
Certainly going to be a fun summer next summer. And it'll be interesting to see how Vancouver gets around as well with the fan zone not downtown, that it could really spread across the whole city, or it could be very split. Whereas Toronto, it will just, I think, completely encapsulate downtown. I was talking with Chris Jones about it, that there's a potential that the Maple Leafs are in the Stanley Cup final at the same time that Canada has started their World Cup, and
Let's
that would
talk
be
about
insane.
realistic things like Canada going to a semifinal here. Come on.
There is the possibility of that, and I think a concern of probably MLSE at that as well.